All right. Michael from Malaysia. Wow. I don't think we've ever had somebody from Malaysia on before. That's awesome. Mel in Salt Lake City, what I'm going to say my old stomping grounds, because I lived up in Morgan, Utah for about 8 years and came down to Salt Lake quite a bit, which is about a 40-minute drive. Yeah, we liked Salt Lake. As far as the city goes, I liked Salt Lake. I'm usually not a city guy. I try to avoid them, but Salt Lake I didn't mind so much. So welcome in, Mel. John says sound is okay. Neil says hi. Chip says it's all clear. All right, good. That's exciting. Well, let's I don't want to waste anybody's time with all of this chitter chatter, but what we're going to do in this entire series, and today is obviously week 1, we're going to be jumping in here and we're going to be talking about the practical uses of Photoshop. So what I mean by that when I say practical uses is I'm not going to sit here and show you every little button and every little nuance of Photoshop and all sorts of crazy things that you may never use. I'm going to go in and I'm going to show you how you can do practical things with Photoshop and show you the tools that are going to be a part of doing that. And then if you want to be able to take it beyond that, well, then you can start to, learn the stuff we're talking about and then expand that later, learning how to do other things that are in there. So Harry the Big Dog is here. Good to hear you, Harry. Freddie says he's here from SoCal, my other old stomping grounds. Freddie, I was in Lake Elsinore, Canyon Lake area for a couple of years, and it's a little north of Temecula, but it's still SoCal. And, we spent a lot of time in San Diego at Hodad's eating hamburgers. And Freddie, being in SoCal, you probably know Hodad's. So give a shout out for them if that's the case. We used to love to go there every once in a while. So, all right. So without further ado, let's get into Photoshop. I am going to pop up my screen here. And once I do, we'll be able to take a look at Photoshop and see some of the things that we're doing. And we're going to share some other things besides just Photoshop, some guides that we're doing. Gary from Woodstock. Okay, so this is getting to be repetitive, but that's also my former stomping grounds. I grew up just over the border in Rhode Island, and I lived for a number of years in Plainfield. Woodstock, Georgia. Oh, my gosh. All right, Gary, Woodstock, Georgia. Well, I live in Georgia now, so everybody seems to be from wherever I live or used to live. So I lived near Woodstock, Connecticut. Now I live in Georgia, but I'm not sure how close to Woodstock that is because I don't know where Woodstock, Georgia is. Still don't know my way around here too well yet, but welcome in, Gary. All right. So to get started here, what we have, this is part of the new Photoshop. And if you haven't, if you've used Photoshop before, there's been a number of changes. When you get into the actual program itself, you're going to see that a lot of that is still pretty similar to the way it was. But right here, what we have is this is a new kind of a launch page for Photoshop, which is a new thing. And on here, you'll see a lot of your past things that you've created. Okay. And they're supposed to be based off of the last things you created. But what's kind of funny is it tends to save things that, well, I'm not sure because, this we made a couple months ago and it's still here. And this as well. And this is from a couple months ago as well. But this is brand new, and this is brand new, and this is brand new. So what it does is it shows you some of your more recent things. Why it shows some really old stuff, I don't know. But I'll be honest with you, I hardly ever use this page for anything other than hitting Create Now or Open. And this page really isn't even a necessary page. It's just a kind of a quick launch page that you have here. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to start by hitting Create New. Okay, and the reason we're going to do that is if we're going to do everything, we want to just start from scratch and really build this up. So what we're going to talk about today is how to create banners for social media, because that's something that everybody has to do. Whether you're doing a YouTube channel background or a Twitter channel background or a Facebook background for your page, whatever it is, you're going to be creating it usually from scratch. Or let me change that, at least the first version of it will be from scratch, because what you're probably going to end up doing is you're going to build your YouTube background or build your Facebook page background from scratch. And then you're going to use what you've already created to make everything else so it all matches. Because the big thing we want to do when we're creating this stuff is we want everything to match. We want our Facebook to match our YouTube channel, which we want to match our Twitter, which we want to match our this and that's, and everything goes together. Okay. Now I'll be honest, I'm not always been the best of that for myself, but for my clients, I'm pretty strict on that. I work very hard to try and make the clients all compliant, even though, quite honestly, I'm probably not in many cases for some of my own brands, which is something I need to work on. And Gary, welcome in as well, north of Atlanta. Oh, okay, good. Lola from Boston, my other stomping grounds. I used to work up there for years. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a YouTube background because it's something that I do a lot of and something that I tend to do quite often. And I'm going to share some things with you that will help you out with YouTube. So the first thing we want to know is the size. So if we're going to create a YouTube channel background, you're going to need to know the size of a YouTube channel background. And in this case here, it's 2560 by 1440, which is a very large graphic. And by the way, just to share one thing with you here, we actually have a social media guide that we've created here for you that's going to give all this information on the different platforms. And so when we come in here, you can see we've got Facebook sizes, we've got Instagram sizes, we've got Twitter sizes, LinkedIn sizes, YouTube sizes, Pinterest sizes, and Tumblr sizes. And so if we go to the YouTube sizes here, you'll be able to see that it kind of lists things a little bit differently, but I'm going to show you what you actually do with this. So here you can see it says desktop size is 2560 by 423, mobile is 1546 by 423, et cetera, et cetera. And the TV is 2560 by 1440. Now, the thing about YouTube is that the graphic for YouTube, for a YouTube background, is always 2560 by 1440. So this is a little bit different than, let's say, in Facebook, where you have different sizes for different things. All of these backgrounds are going to be 2560 by 1440. When you see here 2560 by 423, what that is that's what is visible to somebody on the desktop, okay? And so, in other words, when we make the actual graphic, it's going to be the size for a television. So if somebody's looking at this on a television, it's going to fill up the entire HD or 4K television screen. But when you're on a desktop, it's going to show a portion of that larger image. And the same for mobile and tablets. It's going to show a portion of the larger graphic. And by the way, if you want to see a representation of this, if we head over to, let's say, to Google for a minute here, and you do a search for YouTube channel art template, okay, you're going to see that you're going to get some graphics here. I'm going to go to the images area, and this kind of explains it a little bit. So if we open up this right here, this kind of shows you what I mean. So if we look at this big one, this big, all the whole gray image here would be for the television, okay? So you would put a graphic on this, and it would fit this entire image. However, inside the desktop, you're only going to see this middle section, and then on a mobile device, only this middle section here. And you can see we've got these different guides here. And so when we create for YouTube, you're going to build to the middle. You're going to build so that everything important is here, and everything out here is just kind of background to fill the space. And John says, is there a download for this? Yes, there is. In fact, let me paste that into the chat here. Sorry, I should have done that right away. So what I've done is I've created a membership area where you're going to get access to all the replays, but it's also lesson 1 is up there now, even though there's no video in lesson 1 yet until we finish today. The guide link will be there, and you can get into it there. So this is, oh, no, that's not it. Sorry, my apologies. Let me grab that link one more time here. So we're going to copy that, Photoshop Practical. And, oh, let's try that again. Copy Photoshop Practical. There we go. And so now I'm going to paste that into the comments area here. Okay. And so if you go there, you'll be able to sign up for the course. Now, you're already signed up for the course because you're here live, but you'll be able to sign up to get access to the replays, as well as some of the templates that we put up and the different things that we add in there, because we're going to be putting other things like Photoshop actions in there, some templates and things as the weeks progress. But right now there's a link to the guide for that. And that guide will change, by the way, as Facebook changes and YouTube changes. Those things will change. So again, what we want to do is we want to build for this here. Now, one cool thing you can do is we can actually take this, and I should make one of my own, just so we can have that. And maybe I'll do that later today and put that up into our membership area, is you can save this to your desktop or wherever, and you can open this up and bring it into your Photoshop image that you create. So we're going to start off here. We know it's 2560 by 1440, which I actually have as a custom default here, but you can come over here. When you hit new, just put in 2560 by 1440, and the resolution can be 72. It can be 300. It's going to default to 72. 72 is screen resolution. That's perfectly fine. Leave it at that. So 2560 by 1440, 72. Make sure, by the way, that that's pixels and not inches. If you make it inches, the file is going to be massive and you probably won't even be able to open it. So make sure it's set to 2560 pixels by 1440 pixels, okay? And once we do that, we're going to hit create, and it's going to open up our document. And Victor says, will there be a replay? Yes, Victor, the link that I just shared, raiselinks.com/PS training, that's where all of the replays are going to go. It's a membership site, so you'll be able to go back as many times as you want and watch the lessons. Obviously, this lesson will be up, an hour or two after we're done. Okay, so here's our 2560 by 1440 graphic. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take that downloaded little guide here that we created, and we're going to bring that into Photoshop, just like so. And when we do, you'll see it pops up in here. Now it's a little bit smaller, but you'll see it's got these handles around it. And what we can do is we can just grab those handles and just drag them to the corners so that it fills the screen, just like so. Okay. And so now we can see the template of what that's going to look like. So again, this middle section here is what you would see on your computer or laptop. And depending on the size of your screen, that may shrink a little bit left to right, but it'll always be the stuff in here that's going to be the most important. On a tablet, you're going to see from here to here. And on a mobile, you're probably going to see from here to here. On a TV, it would show the entire thing. So we want to build based upon the middle. And if anyone has any question about that, hopefully that makes sense. And once I start building, you're really going to see how that makes sense. Now, inside of Photoshop, before we get started designing, we actually can create our own guides, because once we start to build, this is going to get hidden and we may not be able to see it. So what we can do is we can actually add our own guides to the page to make sure that we're building for the middle. And the way that we do that is you'll notice that in my document, I've got these rulers along the top and the sides. Okay. Now, those are actually not necessarily there by default. So what you have to do is you have to turn them on and off. And the way we do that is by hitting either Command R on a Mac or Control R on a PC. And that's going to turn those on and off. Okay. And that's going to show you what the sizes are of the image. But more importantly, in this case, this is what's going to allow us to drag our guides. So what we do is we bring our pointer up into the ruler area, and we click inside the ruler. So inside the numbers area, and we drag down. Now you notice it brings a line along with me here, okay? So we're just going to put this line right on that blue line that's already there. Okay, and it doesn't have to be smack on perfect. It's just got to be close enough that it's not going to be, make a difference in the actual image. So that's pretty darn close right there. In fact, that's a little bit low. So I'm actually going to bring that up a little bit here, try to hit that line a little better. So right about there, perfect. And now we can do the side ones as well. For me personally, I'm just going to put this one here and this one over here, because that's kind of our least common denominator. Everybody's going to see what's in here, whether they're on a phone, a desktop, or a tablet. And so we're going to build towards this here. Now, this does not mean we can't put stuff over here. It's just we have to know that this is the stuff that everybody's going to see. So if you got a company name, if you got a logo, if you've got a phone number, if you got a website, you want it all to be in this area, okay? All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to create, in this case, I think we'll create a channel background for a local marketing channel, okay? And we actually did a course specifically on making YouTube channels for local areas, so for cities and towns. And so I'm just going to kind of do what we did there because I think it's a good representation. So what we're going to do is we're going to make one for the town of, let's see, how about Lawrenceville, Georgia, because I need to make one for that anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put something into the background, and then I'm going to start putting in the information. Now, in this case here, I'm going to go out to the web and I'm going to go to Google Maps. So I'm going to hit maps.google.com. And the reason for this is I want to put a map in the background because I think that's kind of a good thing to use when we're doing one for a local area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for Lawrenceville, Georgia. Okay. And you can see there's the city of Lawrenceville, and I'm going to close that out there, and I'm going to move this towards the center. And I'm even going to zoom out just a little bit here. And I'm going to do a screen capture. Now, on a Mac, Command-Shift-2, oh, sorry, that's the wrong button. Command-Shift-4 is going to allow you to drag and copy. Now, if you're using a Windows PC, you can use something like Snagit. I think there's a built-in one in Windows too. If anybody knows that, let me know. But it basically just grabs a screenshot, okay? And you can see that screenshot right here, and it's going to save that automatically to my desktop. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come into Photoshop, and this time I'm going to hit File, and I'm going to hit File, and I'm going to place that into my my image. And now one thing you can do is we could open it. In fact, let me do that just to show you. So if we hit Open and we go to Desktop, we're going to find our image here. Now, if we hit Open, it's going to open it in a new document. Okay, so this is a totally different image, which is okay because what we can do is we can actually click on this. And actually, first of all, let me change that. Sorry, my apologies. This is going to put it as a background, so we can't move this yet. So what we want to do is come over to our layers. Now, if you don't have the layers open, you're going to go to Windows. You're going to go to Layers. This is going to open up this panel here, which is going to show you all the different layers of your image. Okay. Gary says Jing is free. Yep, Jing is free, and Snip and Sketch for Windows also. So look those up if you don't have that. I think you could even hit the, I think there's even a total screen capture thing on Windows as well, and then you can just crop it. So what we're going to do is we're going to double click on this background, and we're going to turn it into an actual layer. Okay. And so now when we do that, we can now move this around, which we couldn't do before. Okay. So once we have that set up like that, what we're going to do is we're going to grab this. We're just going to drag over and hover over our tab here, and that's going to bring it into our other window, and then we can drag and drop it in, and now boom, our map is now in our other document. The other thing that we can do is we can come in here, and instead of doing that, we can actually place the image, and when we place the image, that's just going to add it to the next layer. So you can do either one, will work fine. You could also go to your desktop. Okay, so let's go out to the desktop for a second, and we can go to our screenshot here, and you could just drag and drop it in. Oh, let's put it in Photoshop instead. Drag and drop it into Photoshop. And that's going to kind of do the same thing where you can resize it just like we did before. Once we're done resizing, you hit Enter. Okay, so now I've got it on 2 layers. I don't need this second layer, so what I'm going to do is I am going to delete that layer by just dragging this down to the little trash can here, and that's going to make it go away. Okay, and so now we've got our background here. My apologies, this map is very green, and so our guides that we have are a little tough to see because they are almost the same color as that green there, but the guides are still there. And if I drag this out of the way, you can see our guides are still there. And I'm going to try to center this up a little bit here. Okay, and we got Lawrenceville kind of in between the bottom line and the top line. Okay. And so that's where we want to set that out. Now that's going to be our background for this particular graphic. But we want to make this a whole lot better than just a map on a background. We want to stylize this. We want to add some text. And we're going to give this a name of something along the lines of Lawrenceville Businesses. Nice and simple. But what I want to do is I want to decide what kind of colors I want to use and how I want this to look. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back out to the web here, and I'm actually going to search Lawrenceville, Georgia. Okay, and the reason for this is I want to see on their official website what colors they use, what logo they use. Okay, and so we can see here they tend to use a bunch of different colors, but it looks like this kind of reddish orange is the color that they use. Now, there's a few things that we could do here. If you're building this background for your company or for somebody else's company, you're probably going to have their logo. Okay, if you don't, you can come to their website, and chances are you can just grab that, drag it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to save it to my desktop here, And then we can use that logo. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go and steal people's logos and use them, for your own when they're not your logo. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to do this as if you have permission to use their logo for some company that you're working for. So what we can do is we can come in and we can use this logo and bring that into our Photoshop document. Again, drag and drop, and that's going to put it in here. Now, once again, it's going to have that resizing tool where we can make this bigger or we can make it smaller. Beware, however, that this is a bitmap image. So if you make it big, it may start to look a little bit blurry. And you can see that here in this black circle where it's got the name. It says Lawrenceville, Georgia. You can see that it's kind of pixelated and blurry because of that. And even the lettering here, it may be tough to tell in the recording, but using it on the real screen here, I can tell that the letters are starting to get a little blocky and blurry because of that. Okay, but this is also massively oversized. So what we want to do is we want to make this a little bit smaller. So we're going to take that and we're going to resize it, okay? Now, the way we do that, by the way, is once we have it here, if we hit Command-T on a Mac or Control-T on a PC, it's going to bring up that border again where we can resize it. And one thing to note, this is something that's changed by default in Photoshop. If you grab one of these corners and you drag, you'll notice that it stays in the same aspect ratio. That circle remains a circle. In the old days, you used to have to hit the Shift button to do that. Now it's reversed. If I want to distort this, I can hold down the Shift key, and now I can make this any shape that I want. And what's cool is if I let go of the Shift key, whoop, it's going to snap right back and only allow us to keep it in that perspective, okay? So we would want to have this somewhere maybe around this size. And so we can take that and we can put that in the middle. Again, our guides are tough to see because of the color of the map, but it's right here and right here. So if we wanted to put that right in the middle, we could do that. Now you'll notice that as I move it over here, it's going to kind of snap. And that snap is the center of the image, okay? And so that's how you'd know if you're in the center. Now, one thing you'll notice about this is that right now, this is very difficult to read, at least in my opinion, because that map is too prominent. It stands out too much. It mixes up with the lettering here. So it may be difficult to actually see what this says. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we can see the background a little bit, but make sure that we can see the logo standing out even more. And so what I'm going to do is one of a few different things. One, we could come in here and we could select our map. And by the way, the top tool here is our selection tool. In the far left here with all of our tools, we use this. We click on this, and that's the select tool. So now we can actually select something that's in the image and move it around. So if I want to move the logo, I can click on the logo and then drag it around. If I want to move the background, I can click on the background and now move the background around. By default, this should be turned on and work this way. If for some reason you're clicking from the background to the foreground and it's not changing, look up here in the options for the select tool. There's an auto select button here. If you turn this off, or if it's turned off, you will not be able to switch between the two. And so now if I'm on the logo and I click on the background and then I try to move it, it's going to move the logo. Okay, so just make sure that that is auto select turned on for layer. You can do it for groups, but you want to do it for layers in this point. Okay, so now when we do that, whatever we click on, we should be able to move independently. Let's move our map back here. But as I said, our big issue here is that our map is a little bit too prominent and it makes it difficult to read what's on the background. So we can do a few different things. Now over here, we already talked about the layers panel. Again, make sure your layers panel is open by going to Window and making sure Layers is selected. Your layers, by the way, could be hidden. So make sure you look around because your layers will be here somewhere, okay, if it's turned on. And by the way, this is completely manually adjustable. So this layer palette here could be in here. It could be up here. It just depends on where it's set by default or where somebody left it last time. So I could move this layer and have it up in this menu instead if I wanted to, but I like to have it down here. And so that's where it's going to be, so that I always know where it is. So in here, you've got different layers. Now, right now, we know that the background is that white background from the very beginning. Okay. This image here, this is our guide. And what we want to do to make sure that we keep everything organized is we want to come over into our layers. And if we click on the image here and we click on the text here, double click on the text, we can change this. So I'm going to put YouTube guide. So we know that that's the YouTube guide. Now here we know this is our map background. So we're going to double click the words there and we're going to put map. Okay. Now make sure when you do this, you double clicking on the word inside of the layer. If you double click over here where the layer, where there is no words, it's going to open up the layer palette. Okay. And that's not what we want right now. We will definitely go into the layer palette in a minute because it's one of the most powerful tools inside of Photoshop, in my opinion. Now up here, we know this is the town logo. So I'm going to double click that and I'm going to call it logo. And I know that's kind of small and probably tough to see, but so that just will allow us as we're working here to make sure that we know what each layer is. Okay, so what can we do to make this map stand out a little bit less so that we can read the text? Well, there's a couple of things that we could do with this. Actually, there's a lot of things we could do with this. The first one is a very easy one. Inside of our layer palette, you'll notice over here, we've got two things, one that says opacity and one that says fill. In this situation here, these both do basically the same thing. Whatever is in that layer, you can make it more or less visible. Now, with fill, what that means is if we have added things to this, it's going to remove just certain things from that background. Right now, it's the only thing. So if I click on this and I go down like this, you'll see that it starts to disappear. Okay. And if we do it from here, it's the exact same thing. It's going to start to disappear in exactly the same way. However, if we were to take this layer and add different things such as a colored background or something like that, then the fill button would just bring down the colored background and not necessarily the whole image or the whole layer. So what we want is the whole layer. So first of all, I'm going to come over here and with this eyeball, I'm going to turn off our guide so that we don't see it. And now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to bring this down. Whoops, wrong one. Sorry. Go to our map and we're going to bring this down. And you'll see the map starts to become more and more white. So you can still see it, but it's not quite as powerful. Okay. And so now the Lawrenceville, Georgia and the logo stands out a lot more than it did. So that's one thing that we can do. And it's very simple. And, you know, for many situations, this might be all you need to do. If this is all you need, you could save this out and you're done. But what we want to do is we want to show you how to do even more with this. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back here and we're actually going to bring that opacity back up for a minute. Another thing that we could do is make sure that our map is selected and we could add a filter to this. In this case, probably a blur. And so if we come up here to the top to filter, you'll notice that there's a lot of different filters in here. We're going to go to blur and then inside blur, I'm going to go to the Gaussian blur. Now Gaussian blur just means it's going to blur the whole thing in every direction evenly, similar to being an unfocused lens almost. Okay, even though we do have lens blurs in here, but this is what we want. So we're going to hit Gaussian blur and you're going to see, boom. So now notice how much more that text stands out. But of course, right now, we kind of can't tell that that's even a map. Most people would probably be able to guess if they looked for a minute, but we can change how much of a blur is on this. So if we cut this back, see now we know that that's a map of Lawrenceville, but the Lawrenceville is standing out. Now, one thing I do want to notice, I do want to adjust here, is I'm going to hit OK for a second. The one thing that stands out with this is underneath on this map, the word Lawrenceville is literally gray and on these gray Georgia letters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the background and I'm just going to move the map a little bit so that the word Georgia is on a clear spot so it's easier to see. Okay. So now we've got this blurred background and that works really well also. So that's something very simple you could do to get this to stand out. And you could mix this, by the way. So if we wanted to, we could also come in here and bring this down a little bit. And so now we've got a blurred and duller black background so that you can read the foreground. And that makes life a whole lot easier. But of course, why do such simple things when we can do much more advanced things? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do some undos, which is Command Z on Mac or Control Z on PC. And another thing we can do, by the way, I should bring up now is you can come in here and we can look for the history palette. So if we open the history window and we bring this down here, you'll notice all the things we've done are listed here in a history from when we created the new document all the way down to the last things we did. And so we can actually go in and say, you know what, let's go back to here. Back to here. And now look at what it did. It went all the way back to when we were way back here. And I said, oh, no, that's too far. Let's go back to where we did the fill there. Oh, there we go. And let's see. So you can come in here and you can add back in the things that you did from the Gaussian blur. So now we're right before we did the Gaussian blur. Perfect, right? That's exactly where we want to be. So the history palette can be very important for doing that, okay, and help you to go through each of those things. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to get a little more fancy with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back out for just a second and look at Lawrenceville here. So they use orange, they use blue, they use green, they use gray, they use some blues. In fact, they use a lot of blues. So their colors seem to be blues and oranges. So what we can do is we can actually use that to our advantage. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use something that I alluded to a moment ago. And that's the layer styles palettes, okay? And so what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our map here. And we're going to double click on our map. And that's going to bring up this palette right here. And this is the layer styles palette. This allows you to do all sorts of things to your layers, from putting color on top of them to adding drop shadows to items, to putting patterns and strokes around things, shadows, you name it, you can do it all from in here. Now for the map, most of the stuff that we do here isn't going to be visible because we put a drop shadow on it. It won't matter because the image covers the entire palette, so you wouldn't be able to see a shadow. It would be off the screen anyway. But what we can do is we can do things like color overlays. So if I click on color overlay, watch what happens to our map. Okay. Instantly it adds a color. Now normally, I hit gradient, sorry. Color overlay. See, there we go. That's what I was looking for. It's going to cover that entire map background. So now we don't see that map at all. We can do some fun stuff from in here. So if we click on our color overlay, you're going to see that with this one, there's not a ton of options to it. But what we can do is once we put that blue on there is we can lower it down to wherever we want. Okay, so if we wanted to be able to have it mostly blue and still see that map, we can do that. And I apologize that in the recording here, the colors look a little more muted than on the actual screen. It actually looks a lot more vibrant. But I will say that this is very clashy right now and not something that that looks fantastic. But we can do this. Now, we have some other tools in here. This is the blend mode of normal. But there are other blend modes that we could use, such as darken, which you're not even going to see much of a difference there because what it's doing is it's adding the blue to make it darker, but it kind of was already doing that with this particular color anyway, so you don't see much of a difference there. We can multiply, which what you see here is you'll notice that when we multiply, the lines and things that are on the map got darker and the light areas kind of stayed the same. And so that's what that does. It literally multiplies the dark areas. And if we turn it back off, let's put it back to normal, you see the difference. You can see a lot of that in like the reds and things where they really start to stand out. We could do color burns, which is just kind of adds like this weird effect to that background, which in this case looks kind of strange. And there's different types of burns, linear burns, darker colors, and that actually looks kind of cool, could be useful. You've got lightening, where you can lighten the screen up. Now, obviously, a dark blue is not going to lighten anything on the screen because everything on the screen is already lighter than it. So it really makes no difference. Screen is going to be like as if a blue is being projected over it, which again, right here, you don't really see too much anyway. If we bring this up a little bit, you can start to see it a little more, okay? Color dodge is not going to do a whole lot with this. It's going to kind of make the colors a little weird. But in different situations, these tools will be a big help. For this one here, things like darken and multiply, things like overlay could be useful, okay, depending upon how you use them. And you can start to have some fun and really do some cool things. You can add a hue to it, so everything starts to turn that blue color, which, by the way, is a very useful tool. So if you have a chance to do that, you'll notice it turned all the darker colors into shades of blue. That stands out really nicely. I kind of like that, okay? For now, I'm going to turn that off, though, because I want to show you a few of the other options that we have. Okay, so we can do the gradient like we showed before. And what that does is that's very similar to what we just did, except instead of one color, it's showing a gradient. You can see it's darker down here and lighter on the top. And we can make that a lot more prominent if we wanted. We could use multiple colors. And if we click on the palette here, so you can see where we got the blue to blue on this little palette, if we click on that, that brings up the gradient editor. Now here, we could choose one of these crazy gradients and watch what happens when we do, okay? You can see that it does some pretty funky stuff with that background with just the click of a button. Now, are any of these professional looking and ones that we want to use? Well, you know, that's up for debate. Some people might love it, but for me, probably not. Maybe some of these down here, like, you know, some of these could possibly be better for it. But what we want to do is probably create our own. And it's very, very easy to create your own. So what we can do with that is inside the gradient editor, you'll see down here, we've got these two shades of green, kind of a weird limey green, and then here more of a deep green. Well, what we can do is we can actually change some of this. So if we click on this little tag right here, we can change the color. Okay, so we could make it blue. And we could click on this one and change the color here and make this red, or we could make it yellow, or whatever it is that we think works best in this situation. In my case here, I might even go with like a gray so that it goes from a blue to almost a gray or transparent color. And there, so now we can add that in there. Now, maybe I want to say, oh, you know what? The blue isn't dark enough, so we're going to make a darker blue. Okay, and we'll see if that makes much of a difference, and it kind of does. And you can see it's a very smooth, dark to light on the different color scale here, but we could do other things to this as well. We could move this around so that the dark is only at the very bottom, or we could make it so that the dark goes all, oh, look, I did something else I'm going to show you in a minute. I didn't mean to do that. That was accidental. So grab that diamond here, and we can move it so that it's dark all the way through up until the top. Now, the other thing we can do, which you kind of just saw me do, was we can add more to this. So I could click in here and add another spot. And so now we can see it going from blue to this yellowy gray all the way through here, but I could change this and just like before, change this to a different color, like maybe a bright blue, okay? And so now we're going to be going from dark to light blue all the way to the light. And that's how you can add a gradient to these things. And a gradient can really help you to stand out, okay? Now we do see one problem here. In this, with the way we've got it set right now, these colors clash a little too much because under Lawrenceville is Georgia, and you almost can't even see it now because it's just gotten lost in there. Okay, but that's another thing we can do is we can add a gradient to it. Now for me, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our color overlay, and I'm going to use this multiply because I kind of like that. I think that works really, really nice there. So again, I'm using this gradient of actually, I think I'm using solid blue. Yes, solid blue, but I've got it set to the hue so that it turns everything in the background a blue color. Okay, and so now I'm going to hit OK, and that's going to show us what it looks like now. Now, again, we can still do some of the things that we talked about here. So I can still make this a little more transparent and turn off that layer. Okay, so now we've got the blue map, which is their other color is blue, but it's lighter. Okay, and we could still come up here and we could still add maybe even a slight blur to that to make it stand out even more. So we could go to blue, go to Gaussian blur again, and this time bring it down to just a small one. Okay, and so now we've got that lightened background that's using the blue color, and it's a little more blurred out. And again, I still don't like that Lawrenceville is kind of right there. So we're going to hide it up there a little bit just like that so Georgia stands out. Okay, and so now we've got a background that's starting to come together. So we've got a logo, we've got text, and we got a background. So now what we want to do is we want to work on this logo portion here. And the way we do that is we select that logo, and now we're going to double click the logo instead of the background. And that's going to bring up our layer palette again, but this time it's going to be for this element here. And so what we can do now is we can do things like add a drop shadow, okay? And that is not a very good drop shadow, but that's a drop shadow. So what we want to do is we're going to select the drop shadow. We're going to make that even better. So right now we've got a spread of 39 and a distance of 8 and a size of 16. Okay, so what we want to do is we want that spread to come down a little bit. Just like so. And makes that Georgia really, really difficult to read, unfortunately. So we're going to want to play with that too. Now size, we can make it blurrier. Okay. just like that. And I apologize for that flashing on the screen there. It's been doing that lately, and I don't know what setting I've done or turned off that's making it do that, but for some reason it does that every once in a while. Up here, we can choose how strong or weak our shadow is. So we can change the opacity. So if we wanted to do something subtle, we can do that right there. Okay. But it's starting to look pretty good. We can also change the distance, by the way, which ignore that L-shaped line there. That is actually not there. That is some sort of graphics card issue. I'm not sure why it's doing that. But you can see our shadow is now further away from there, and we can bring it back as well. And we can change the opacity as much as we want here until we get exactly what we're looking for. Okay. So somewhere around there. And now that's looking pretty good. And again, that little L shape here, ignore that. That's not really there. That's an anomaly from the graphics card that's acting weird lately for some reason. Now, some other things that we could do with this. Now, this would not work very well with, may not work very well with this logo because we blew this logo up a little bit, so it may cause issues rather than making it better. But some of the other things that we could do is we could make this stand out a little bit more, make it look a little more three-dimensional, or just make it stand out. We could use a stroke on this, okay? Now, stroke, when we do that, actually, that looks a lot better than I thought it would. So you can see what the stroke does there is it puts a line around the item, okay? And in this case here, it's this red line. Normally, what we'd probably want to start with is just going with a solid black or a solid white. In this case here, you can see white kind of popped up. And once you do this, now, for instance, we've got the white here, and I actually kind of like that, and I'm going to show you why. Because now we can actually go back into our drop shadow here, and with that white around it, we can actually make that shadow darker, okay? And it actually makes it stand out now because, especially around the word Georgia, you can see that it makes it stand out a little bit more. And we can come in here and we can change this distance. We could change the spread. We could change the size. We could even make the size less if we wanted to. But I kind of like when we got that white outline on that, doing that really makes it stand out. And I kind of like the look of that. Yes, Freddie, there is. Freddie asked if there's a membership area. Yes, there is a membership area. I put it down below. It's raiselinks.com/PS training. And this one will go in there afterwards. But if you click on that, that'll allow you to sign up for the membership in there. It's a free membership. And this lesson will go in there, and then all the other ones will as well. Okay, so now we're starting to get something that looks pretty good. So I'm going to hit OK on this. And you'll notice that weird line disappeared. So that actually stands out pretty good. And I'm looking at the lesson in the webinar. It actually looks a lot better in real life than it does in the webinar. The orange stands out a lot more, and the Georgia stands out a lot more. So it's a little tough to understand in the actual lesson, but just imagine that looks a little bit better in real life than it does there. So that's something that we can do. So now we've got a background, we've got the stylized logo, and everything ready to go. But of course, we need to take this another step further. So I'm going to say, you know what? This website or this YouTube channel isn't about Lawrenceville, Georgia. It's about Lawrenceville businesses. So really, the logo's okay because of the town, but the Lawrenceville, Georgia, that doesn't work for me. We need to do our own stuff that says Lawrenceville business. So what we're going to do now is we're going to mess with this logo. Now, we brought this logo in from our desktop. And what that does is that makes it what's called an unrasterized image. And what that means is it's mathematically not really a graphic at this point. It's almost like a mathematical equation for a graphic. And when you're using things like vectors, that's a really cool thing because you can blow them up as large as you want and they'll never get blurry. In the case of this, you blow this up, it is going to get blurry. So you notice when we hit that Command or Control T, oh, sorry, let me go to the graphic here. Command T, it makes that box around here, and you notice that it's got this little X going across here, and that means that this is still an unrasterized image, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit return on that, and I'm going to come over here to our layers and to our logo, and I'm going to right-click on this logo. And then you can see here there's a section called Rasterize Layer. And what that's going to do is that's going to turn that from a reference graphic to what's on my desktop to an image that's actually in Photoshop and represented by pixels. Okay. I'm explaining it a little more complex than you probably need to know. Basically, you just want to hit rasterize layer, and that's going to turn it into a graphic, okay? And you'll notice on here, this changed. It used to have a little logo in the corner of the box here, and now it does not. That means it is now just a traditional graphic. And if we hit Command or Control T now, you'll see that it makes the box around it, but there's no X. And that means that this is just a bunch of pixels that represent that graphic, okay? And so what we want to do is we want to use the round logo part here, but not their text. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn off the effects by clicking the eye icon here. So it goes back to normal, because once we have just this circle, we really don't need that stylization on there. We need it for the text. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to our tools on the left-hand side, and I'm going to select this selection box, okay? And it's that little dotted box in the corner here, way in the upper left. And now I'm going to come back to our graphic, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a box around the words, okay? And the reason for that is very simple. I want to get rid of the words, so I'm going to hit delete, and it's going to disappear. And so now we have just the round logo, which is exactly what we want. So what we want to do now is we want to make a layer that says Lawrenceville Businesses. So I'm going to come over to our tools on the left again, and I'm going to click the T here for text, just like so. And now you'll see our icon looks like a word processing document icon, which might be tough to see in the lesson. And I'm going to click on right here, okay? And you can see it brings in this text. And I'm just going to type in Lawrenceville. There we go. Businesses. Okay. Now the cool thing about this is this text here actually is pretty similar to the text that the Lawrenceville graphic already used. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over here a little bit. I'm going to move this over here. And we can do a couple of things with this. We could, because Lawrenceville is a long name, we could hit our T again, and we could put it on 2 lines. Okay. And I think that probably works better for us. And so now we can take our 2 lines and we can move them here. Now, for me, these 2 lines are too far apart. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back to our T icon again, and we're going to click inside the word so that we have, that we're actually in the word. So if we type, it actually adds letters here, okay? And we're going to highlight the entire thing. Now we're going to go in, and we can do one of a couple of things. We're going to go into our window up here at the top again, and this time we're going to go and we're going to open up all of our text items. So down here, we'll see paragraphs. Okay, paragraph deals with the text, and we're going to click on this here, and that's going to open up this character and paragraph tab here. And character is what we really want, and you can open it through character as well. I opened it through paragraph because I knew they both open, but you can also choose character up in here too, right here, and that'll open it up. Okay, so we're going to go to character, and we want to reduce the space in between here. So you've got all sorts of really cool text formatting tools here, everything from changing your font, okay, to changing the look of the font that you've chosen. And this one here has a lot of different looks. The size of your font, okay. And then here you've got the ability to change the spacing up and down of the font itself. Right now it's set to auto, but if we were to hit 30, you'll see it moves it way up there, okay. And we say, oh, 30, well, that's not enough. 60, all right, no, that's not enough. And so we can keep changing that, okay. Now, the other thing that we can do is if we highlight this and we hit the Option key and the down arrow key, we can create our space. By continuously clicking that, and you'll see that the word business is going to move down to where we want it. So if I say I want it right there and I think that looks good, then that's where it's going to stay, okay? And so now we've got Lawrenceville Businesses, and I think that looks pretty good, especially next to that little logo there. So I'm going to leave that as such. And now what we want to do is we want to stylize this actual text just like we did before. So again, we're going to come over here, and we're going to go to our layer, make sure that we're not touching one of the words. And this one is long because it's Lawrenceville Businesses. So we need to come over to an area where it's not, where it doesn't have text, double click that again, and that's going to bring up our layer style. Now we remember the Lawrenceville before was an orange color. So maybe we really like that orange color and we want to stick with it to stick with the town colors. So what we can do is we can come to color overlay. Okay. And then we can come in here and we can choose the color that we want to overlay with it. So if we wanted to choose an orange color, like before, we can do that. Okay. And oh, what did I do wrong there? For some reason, the color overlay did not show up. My apologies, guys. I think my Photoshop is acting a little funny because that should automatically do that because we don't have anything else on there. So I'm not sure why it's not changing to orange. All right. We're going to pretend for a second, since we're having a technical difficulty there, that will, under normal circumstances, change to orange. I apologize. You saw before my graphics card was doing weird things. Seems to continue to be doing weird things. But we're going to play along anyway. And who knows, as we do this, it may change the color for us anyway. So the next thing we want to do is we want to come to gradient overlay, and we can try that there as well. And that also does not seem to be making any difference right now. And I'm not sure why that is. Let's double check and make sure we didn't mess with anything here. Okay. So for some reason, yeah, I don't know why. Right now, this should be turning orange automatically. I'm not sure why it's not doing that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and see if, let's make another layer just to test this out. Because again, it should definitely have changed automatically for us. And why it didn't, I don't know. So we're going to try this again. So we're going to come and we're going to open up this one and see if that makes any difference. Let me check the drop shadows here. So drop shadows working. Gradient overlay. Yeah, color overlay for some reason is not working at all. And I don't know why. Oh, you know what? Here we go. There we go. We were still set at hue instead of normal. All right. So let's go back. So my apologies, guys. We forgot to turn off the hue setting. So we're going to go back to our Lawrenceville businesses, and we're going to open that up. See, even I make mistakes with this. So we're going to come over here to our gradient overlay. Notice it's set at our color overlay. Notice it's set at hue instead of normal. That's why, because the different hue of black is still going to be black. So we go there. Now we got our colors in there. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to stylize this even further. We know we like this color. It's their color. So we're going to come back into this. And now we're going to do, let's do our stroke. Okay. And so we can come in here and we can add a stroke to this. Now you can barely see that stroke because it's on that kind of white background. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change this time to a black stroke and see if we like that. Okay. So we put a black stroke on there. On the video, it's looking a little ratty looking. In real life, it's actually much sharper and clearer, just so you know. And we can change the size of this, by the way. Okay, if we like. So maybe something like this. And that's looking okay. Some people like to see a black outline on that. To me, I'm thinking that's, it's okay. It's not great. It's not bad. But there are things we can do to this to make it even better. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back in and we're going to go to our effects again, open up our style palette. And so now we're going to add a bevel and an emboss. And so when I click that, hopefully on the screen, you'll be able to kind of see that. Might be difficult to see. You might see tiny bit of change there. And I'm going to make it extreme so that you can kind of see. What this does is this makes it look like it's a bit more three-dimensional. And if I hit the depth thing here, you can kind of start seeing the little white highlights on the corners there. Hopefully you can see that a little bit. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Okay. And you can kind of start to see how it turns it into a three-dimensional sort of deal. Okay. And if I turn this to an inner bevel, you'll be able to see it a lot better probably too. Now you can see how it looks like it's chiseled. Okay. Because what we have is we have the ability to do an inner bevel and an outer bevel. And this is an inner bevel where all of the stuff from the edges of the letters in is beveled. And when we do outward, it's going to bevel outside of the letter itself. And that's why we have that stroke on the back of that too, because that makes it look as if the bevel is on that stroke. Okay, so if we turned off this stroke, you'll kind of see that the bevel just kind of looks white or clear. But when we put that on there, it makes a difference to that. And our bevel there is huge. So we're going to actually make our stroke a little bigger so we can get it a bit more extreme and seeing what that looks like. Okay, so hopefully now you can kind of see gives it a bit of a three-dimensional look. Okay. And inside of our bevel, we can go even further with that because we can change it from chisel hard to smooth. And so now with smooth, you probably notice a bit of a difference there. And we can also go with chisel soft, which is going to make it kind of mushy looking. But for me, I'm going to go with the smooth. Okay. And then we can actually add contours to this. We can do shading on it. So for instance, right now it's pretty straightforward, but if we come in here, you'll see that we've got a few different options. So we can come in here and we can change the angle of our light. So if we wanted our light to be coming in from over here, you'll see that it'll change. And now you can probably really see that bevel on there. Okay, we can have it, the light coming from the bottom, like so, or either side. Now I kind of like when the light comes from about here. So I'm going to put that back to where it was, maybe over here a little tiny bit. And now the other thing that we can do is we can come in here and we can change the contours of this. So if we click on this here, you'll see there's a few built-in ones. And if we click on here, we can create our own. We're going to use the built-in ones. And one of the ones that I like is this one here with the double peaks. Now, when we do this, watch what this does. Okay. Now you see that? It changed the way that our bevel looks. In fact, I'm going to come in here. I should have done this a while ago. I'm going to blow this up just a little bit. So I'm going to hit OK for just a second, and I'm going to bring this up to, let's say, 200 so we can see that a little better. All right, so now, and I apologize, I should have done that ages ago. So now you can kind of see how this has that like light shining and diffracting over that bevel. And if we go back in and we turned that back off, went to a normal bevel, you'll see now it looks something like that. Okay. And there are different ones that have different reactions to the light. That one, you can't even see anything right there. That one's kind of a softer one. Okay. So you can come in and you can find one that you think gives it that nice 3D look that you're looking for. Like something like that is kind of cool. And you can play around with this as much as you want to really make this stand out. So now we've got this text kind of standing out with the stroke and with the bevel. In fact, I think personally, and you guys can throw out your opinions on this, but I think that stroke is too big. I don't like a stroke being that big on our letters, so I'm going to cut it down to about a 5. And that means that I'm going to go to our bevel, and we're going to cut the bevel down as well because we don't want that to be over the size of the background. So we're going to cut that to 5. And so now we got a nice subtle but standing out beveled edge on our text. Okay. And by the way, this stuff here with the styles, you're going to be able to do so many things with these styles. That's going to blow people away just by putting text and adding these styles to it, or an image and putting styles to it. You can flaunt Photoshop all day long because of all the cool things you can do in there. Okay. So now another thing that we can do is we could, if we wanted, we could change from a color overlay. We could do a gradient overlay still. Okay. So we're going to come in here and we're going to put it to normal. And you can see right now it's kind of got those blue colors. But what we're going to do is we're going to go back and do the orange colors again. So we're going to, let's just choose this one here for a second. We're going to choose this here, and we're going to turn this to an orange. It's maybe something, oh yeah, let's go right about there. And now the other one, we're going to click on here. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to turn it into an orange, but maybe this time we'll go even brighter, or maybe we'll go even darker. Who knows? You can do either one. Like that's too similar. But let's hit OK for that for a second. And I'm going to change that opacity up there. Boom, there we go. And so now we got a gradiated orange color. And again, in the lesson here, it looks a lot more muted than in the actual screen. The actual screen is a lot brighter. But still, I'm going to change this one and go to a deeper orange to really make that stand out. Okay. And so now what do we think? Anybody like what we're seeing? Anybody like some of these things that we've done to this? Does it look good? Does it look terrible? I'd love to hear your opinions on that. But let's have a little more fun. Okay. So now we can still do our drop shadow on this to make it stand out further. And for me, that drop shadow is probably a little strong for what we have since it already stands out. So I'm going to bring that down even more. Okay. to right about there. So I think that's looking pretty good. Now, some other things that we could do inside of here is we could put an inner shadow. Now, an inner shadow means it's going to be as if the orange is kind of deeper in. And so when we turn on this inner shadow, watch what happens, okay? So we turn on the inner shadow, and that's a very small one, but you can see it kind of adds that little bit of a dipped effect in there. And if we spread that out a little bit, so let's go with a slightly bigger size. And again, I apologize for that weirdness. I don't like that. It drives me crazy. I'm going to change the spread a little bit, change the distance. You can start to see some, oh, wondering why it's not working. It's because I'm on the drop shadow. Let's try that again. We're going to go to the inner shadow. I was wondering why. I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't seem to be working. So now we're going to come in here and we're going to do the distance again. And now you'll see when we do the distance of that shadow, now that looks terrible there, but you get the idea of how that works. It kind of puts a shadow on the inside of the letters. And if we soften that up, it can actually give a really cool little effect to it. Okay. Now, for me personally, I think we're starting to add a little too much maybe, but we'll bring that shadow down a little bit. And when we do that, it gives it a nice subtle look to each of the letters, and it can start to look really, really cool. Okay. And so now we've got almost a glossy look to it, which I think is really neat. Our drop shadow, now that I've messed that all up, let's fix that. There we go. Okay, so there are some other tools you may want to see in here as well. Pattern overlay, which, by the way, is just literally a pattern. So you can come in here and there are built-in patterns that you can choose from. And I don't have a ton in here right now, but you know, if we choose one of these, you can see it fills it in with that pattern. Okay, so that's one thing that we can do. Another thing that we can do is what's called satin. And what's cool about satin is when we turn on our color, you'll notice that it kind of has a mottled effect here because that's what the satin does. It looks like satin, okay? And if we bring that down, we can probably get a pretty cool looking effect there. Oops. So we come in here and we choose one of these. Let's see if we can get an extreme. Like you can see there with that one there, it gives it that kind of, I don't even know what the word would be, but it gives it that little lines inside there of light and dark, just like it would be if you had a piece of satin that you were waving around. That's kind of the effect, is like a waving satin pattern. Okay. So without it, looks orange and nice. And with it, it gives it that little effect there. And if we turn off our inner shadow, you'll be able to see that probably even more. Okay. But you can do some really, really neat stuff when you start to really dig in on this. I'm going to turn off the satin. I think it's a little too much for this here. And so now I'm going to hit OK. And so there we go. We've got a really nice little bit of text here. Thank you, Gary. Gary says I'm really good at this. Thank you. I've been doing it for far too long. Okay. So now another thing that we can do here is we can have some fun with the text a little more by doing something else. That's another trick that most people that use Photoshop have no idea that this exists. They don't know how to do it. They've never done it. And that is what we call, and I'll show you this here. So it's a layer within a layer. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new layer by clicking this new layer button, which is right next to the garbage can. And I know it's kind of small. It looks like a little plus symbol. And when I do, you'll see it creates a new layer right above our text here. Okay. And so if I come and do anything on this layer, so for instance, going back to our tools here, if we were to grab this paintbrush here and we were to start drawing, it will draw all over the screen, okay? Because it's drawing on this layer. And if we turn that layer off, it doesn't affect anything else. Now, we don't want to put all that junk on there, so I'm going to delete that anyway. But what I am going to do is I'm going to use this paintbrush tool to do something a little different. So I'm going to change my color. And over here in the bottom of the left-hand palette, you see the two little swatches here. We're going to click the top one, and I'm going to turn that to white. Okay? And so now if I draw on that screen, you can see white. Okay? Delete it. But what I want to do is I want to kind of highlight our text here. So there's two things I'm going to do. In fact, I'm going to do something first, and then I'll show you how I did it afterwards. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to come up here to the top, and I'm going to make my my brush a little smaller. Right now it's at a 68, and so I'm going to make it down to like a 45 or so. Let's say 43. So that's a pretty good size right about there, nice and small. And I'm going to switch to kind of a, well, actually, I'm going to leave that. I'm going to leave that where it was. I'm going to go back to that. I'm going to go to a 35. I'm going to leave all the rest of that there. All right. So we're going to come out here. And now, again, if I draw on the page or on this layer, which I think I messed something up on it here. Boy, I'm just having all sorts of troubles today with things, aren't I? Okay. Well, what did I do now? All right. You know what? I'm going to delete that layer and just get a new one. Again, put it up right here. And so what we want, oh, somehow I switched. Yeah, man, oh man. So now when we draw the little white line. Okay, that's where we want to be. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to add highlights to this. And so I'm going to come in here. First of all, we're going to get rid of the brush settings. And I'm going to click to the left of the letter L, and I'm going to hold the shift key down. Okay? And the reason for that is now when I draw, you'll see it draws a perfectly straight line. Okay? And I'm going to come down to the business area, and I'm going to click next to it. I'm going to hold shift down and draw a straight line as well. Now, right now, that's covering up the entirety of our letters, okay? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the option key, or I forget what they call that on a Windows PC, but it's the one in between the control key and all that. It's a little option key. And I'm going to click on the line in between my text and the layer above it, the layer with the two white lines. And you'll notice when I hover over that with the option key pressed down, it's going to turn into a little arrow. I don't know if you can see that when I do that, but that's what we want, is we want that little arrow. And when I click on this, it's going to bring that tab in a little bit. Now, did you notice that it brought it in here? Okay. So what we want to do now, oh, and I apologize. Dang it, I can't do that anyway. We have to actually make one change here. I've got to turn off my color overlay, okay? And so now you can see our white on our black. So in order to do this, what I have to do is I've got to actually turn these letters orange. Instead of just what we have here with the overlay is we're overlaying those letters with the color orange. And right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the letters to actually be orange. And so I've highlighted them, and I'm going to come up to the top, and I'm going to choose a similar orange color to what we had. So something like this, okay? All right. And the reason I'm doing that is you'll notice now we've got orange with a white stripe in the middle, okay? Now that white stripe kind of looks weird at the moment, but watch what happens when we take that white stripe and we do something to it. So I'm going to highlight the white stripe layer. And once again, I'm going to come up and I'm going to go to Filters, Blur, and Gaussian blur. Okay. I'm going to blur that pretty good. So something like this. Okay. And so now you'll notice it looks like a lighted highlight on that background. And again, we can come in here and we can bring that down just like so. And so now it's a little more subtle. Okay. But it kind of brings out that lit up effect. And again, you know, in the lesson, it looks a little more muted than it does on the screen. On the screen, the orange is a lot more vibrant. Okay. And once again, once we do this, we can still mess around with some of these here like we did before. Right now it's on normal, but if we were to go with, let's say, color dot, okay, you probably won't, well, you don't really see too much of a difference on the color dodge one, but if we go down to some of these other ones, you'll start to see that it makes a big difference to what's going on there with the lighting and everything else. Okay. Like the overlay kind of changes it to an orangey color. So you can really have some cool effects done with this. Linear burn kind of gives that burnt effect there. And again, you can come right back to normal. So that just gives it a nice standout look to it. So that's the basics of getting this ready. Now, obviously, our goal was to talk more about social media in general and not just how to use layer styles. So what we're going to do is we're going to save this and we're going to move on to show how we would use this for other social media. Now, this is a very simple design. There's nothing crazy in this. Yes, we did a lot with that text and we did a lot with the backgrounds, but overall, it's just a logo, a background, and some text. But it looks pretty good, okay? And so what we'd want to do now is we would save this out. So I'm going to hit Save As, and I'm going to save to my computer. And by the way, with Photoshop now, you can actually save to the cloud so that you can open it up on your iPad or whatever, but we're just going to save it locally here. I'm just going to call this Elville YouTube background, okay? And I'm going to save it as a Photoshop document for now. When I'm ready to use this on YouTube, I'm going to want to save this as a JPEG. So that would be down here and just choose JPEG. But right now, this is Photoshop, which means that when we open it back up, all those layers and things will still be intact so we can go back to work. So this is a Photoshop, saving it as a Photoshop document is like a working project, and a JPEG is the final project, or a PNG would be the final project. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to create the next piece of social media. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another new one. Okay, and so for instance, if we're going to do, let's say, a background for a Photoshop page, or excuse me, for a Facebook page, we're going to go back out to our document here, and we're going to go to Facebook, and we're going to take a look here and say, well, profile cover, this is this here. Okay, cover photo, that's kind of what we need. We got timelines, we got news feeds, we got all these different ones here. So what we want to do is we want to make a cover photo this time. And so the recommended size for that is 820 by 312. Okay. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make a new document that's 820 by 312. So we're going to go back to Photoshop. And again, we're going to put 820 by 312. Again, make sure it's set to pixels and not inches. And we're going to hit create. Okay. And so there's our banner size. Now that's looking small, so I'm going to blow this up so we can see it. So what we want to do is we want to have a matching banner to what we have in our other document. So we spent a lot of time building this. We want to have the same thing in our new document for Facebook, okay? And so what we want to do is we want to take these items, and what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to highlight these layers, okay? And we're going to grab them and we're going to drag them, and we're going to go out to our other page here. We're going to drop them in, okay? And so now all that work that we just did is inside of our Facebook document. Of course, it's much, much too big, so we now have to resize everything in here, okay? So what we're going to do is with these things highlighted, we can hit Command T. Actually, we're going to change that a little bit for 1 second because we're going to turn some of these things off. Okay, so we've got our map, and we've got our logo, and we've got our text and our background. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to resize some of these without the background for now. So I'm going to hit Command T, just like we did before, and you'll notice it covers all of these, not just one, it covers all of them. And so now when I click the corner here and I resize, it resizes them all together, okay? Now we will notice one other thing, and I'm going to clarify that in a minute here too. So if we take this and we bring this in here and we say, you know what, we want this to take up most of the page. So we're going to go about this size here. Okay. We're going to put it nice and center for this one, and we're going to hit return. Now by itself, that's looking fairly good, but you may have noticed one slight thing that happened because we took it from a large image here and brought it to a small image here. Our bevels and whatnot are huge. They're much larger because the screen is smaller, okay? And so because our stroke and our bevel and our shadow are based off of actual numbers, those numbers are going to carry through, and on a smaller screen, saying have a stroke of 5 on something that's much smaller is going to make that stroke much bigger in comparison, and so therefore our stroke looks way too big here compared to the other one. So there's a few things that we can do. Now, the first thing that we can do is I'm just going to hide these for 1 minute, and I'm going to go back over to here or to our document here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight. First of all, I'm going to click the background. I'm going to click something to turn the highlights off. I'm going to highlight our logo. I'm going to hit Shift, and I'm going to hit our text. Okay, and you'll see they're lighting up over here. And then I'm also going to hit Shift, and I'm going to highlight, oops, that there too, so that we now have the logo and the text and the line in the middle all together in one piece here. And what we're going to do is we're going to right click on these, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to hit rasterize layers. And what that's going to do is watch. That's going to bring them down, and that's going to get rid of some of the changes in here. And actually, in this one here, we're going to highlight this one here by itself because it's got the we're going to rasterize the layer style. So you do the same thing, but you rasterize the layer style, and now that's going to shrink that down. And actually, let me go back because I actually made a mistake here because that's going to mess up our line up here because our line here is not part of that rasterization. So what we want to do is we're going to do something slightly different. So what I just did a moment ago is I rasterized those things down so that you can move them without the lines changing and whatnot. But because we have our white lines that are actually a different layer, we won't be able to do it that way. So what we want to do is, once again, we're going to come in, we're going to highlight all three, but this time, instead, what we're going to do is we're going to combine them into one layer. And we do that by hitting Command or Control E, the letter E. And so now you'll see they're all one layer. And so if we take this one layer and now bring that over here, we can drop that in. It's going to be big, and we can resize it. But watch, this time when we resize this, our lines around the text are going to get smaller as well. Whereas before, the lines stayed big and the text got smaller. So now we can do this like that. So that's one way that we can do that. The other way that we could do that is we could just simply bring them in like we did before and then go in and resize our lines. Okay, so we would just come in here, we would double click on here, and we would go to our bevel and emboss, and we'd go to our stroke, and we'd make them smaller. So maybe the stroke now needs to be a 2, okay, or maybe a 3. And then we could do our bevel and make our bevel a 3 as well. Okay, and so now we're back to normal. So that's 2 ways you could do it. You could bring them in as is and adjust the sizes of the lines and the bevel, or you can go into the old document and you can layer them down into one and then bring it over. And either way, you're going to get basically the same effect. Okay, so either one's going to be pretty much the same. And there we go. Oops. Okay, so that works just like that as well. And so now we've got our Lawrenceville businesses. Now our map obviously is huge. So we probably want to come in here and we're going to want to resize that. And we'll need to zoom out to do that. Once again, we'll just grab the corners and set them up wherever we want. And now we've got a Facebook background. Okay. Now, again, this is a very simple background. There's nothing real fancy about this. If you were doing this for a business, now let's say that Lawrenceville Businesses was an actual business and not just a town page, then what you would want to do inside of your Photoshop for the YouTube background when you're getting started, or whichever one you start with, is come in here and add maybe their phone number or their website, things like that. And you would just do that by coming in here with text. And this is going to be smaller, so you don't have to do much stylizing for this. So we would put in the phone number, okay, and the website, okay, just like that. And my guess is we probably want to keep that black instead of orange. So we're going to come in and we're going to choose up here and just change the color to black. And because this is going to be smaller, we probably don't want to do anything fancy with it. We don't want to add bevels and shadows and everything else. We want it to be easily read. So we're just going to shrink it down. Command T, shrink it down. And if I can get into it there, just bring that in, put it wherever it makes sense. Like in here, maybe it makes sense right here. Okay. And so now you'll be able to have that information on there as well. And then you would do the same thing on here, or you would finish the first one and bring that in here with it. So once you have the full design here, that's when you would bring it in. And you can get as fancy with this as you want. Another color with these guys is blue. So you could also do something like come in here and use the box tool. So this is the box tool over here on the left. You'll see it looks like a box. We're going to click on that. And I'm going to come to my default colors here, and I'm going to use a blue color, because that was their other color that they used, was kind of a muty blue. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. And this layer I want to put at least below the phone number. And I'm going to come over here And I'm just going to make a box like so. Okay. And let's zoom in a little bit. Okay, so now we got that box there. That box is too small. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Command T on the box, and I'm just going to make it bigger, like so. And then, because we now have a blue box background there, I'm going to hit the text button here, and I'm going to turn this white instead of black. So I'm going to go the exact opposite. And so, whoops. Let's select the entire text and try it again. I'm going to go with white. I'm going to hit OK. And so now we've got the white text on the blue banner across there. And that is something you'd bring that over with the other as well. And again, you can have some fun with this, because if you wanted to, you could start to mess with this banner that's here by clicking on that, double clicking for our layer palette, and then doing a bevel and an emboss if we wanted to. Okay, let's do an inner. Something like that. And just keep playing with that. We can size that up and give that a nice bevel to it. Okay. And now, of course, we may want to mess with some of this because maybe this is too low now. So we're going to highlight this and bring it up north a little bit there. And when we do that, we're probably going to want to move our texts all up and everything else. So we're going to grab our text and logo, and we'll move that up a little bit. So now we have an even more stylized little layer here, and we can make any adjustments we want, like move that down just a little bit. And so now we've got a nice little background there. And again, you can bring this, whoops, my mouse going crazy here. We can bring all of this, including the banner, into our other graphic here and just have that at the bottom. Or because we, Diane asked where the box command is. It's over on the left-hand side with your panels right here. If you can look way to the left, you'll see I'm moving my mouse around it. It's a box button. Okay, there's a box button, there's a rounded box button, there's a circle button, there's a shapes button. And so you just use the box button there. And then you can do that in here. So maybe in here you wanted to do it a little bit different because the graphic is a different shape. Maybe instead of bringing it in from the other one, maybe we want to make the box here. So we choose the box, and maybe this box is going to be a little taller, like so. Okay. And we could still do the same things to it. Obviously, that box is a slightly different color, but that's all right. So you could still come in here, and you could do anything you wanted to it. You could bevel and emboss it. Change the size. Make sure it's inner. Okay, and oh, you know what? We goofed here. Let me change that. I knew something didn't seem right. Make a new layer here. So make a new layer first on this one. Then come in here. Now make our box. I knew our box, that color blue didn't seem right. So now if we make our box, there we go. That's the kind of blue I was thinking. And so now we can make that bigger, and then we could come in here and we can move this up a little bit. Just like so. And now we can come in and we can put in our phone number again. 888-888-8888. And because this is a slightly different style of box, I wanted to do it slightly differently, even though the concept is the same. Okay. So we would still resize this down. Just like so. Okay. Now, one thing to note, this is a Facebook. Whoops. I don't need another text. Get rid of that. This is a Facebook graphic here. Be careful. They don't like a lot of text being shown. So if more of your image is text, they may have a problem with it. I want to show you how you can set that up. I don't know if they would have a problem with this one or not, if it would be enough, but now that's a little bigger. So the problem they could say is, well, 50% of your graphic is text between the text up here and the text down here and the text in this. So they could complain about that, but I don't think they would complain too much about that. I think that would probably fit the bill. Obviously, some other things that we could do with this is we could add some extras to these. Whoops, move that back. So we could come in here and we could resize this down here. See, even I keep hitting that shift key, and maybe move that over here. And so maybe what we want to do is we also want to have some imagery on here. So to make this even cooler, we could go back out to our client's website. In this case, I'm going out to the town's website. If it's going to let me go, it keeps shooting me back here for some reason. What is going on? Okay. Let's try it again. Wow. It's not letting me go out to Chrome for some reason. There, I'm going to move this out of the way and see if, there we go. Whatever works. All right. So we could take an image off of here, you know, like maybe this one here or this one here, and I'm just going to screen capture it. Actually, one other trick I want to show you on a Mac, and I don't know if you can do this on a PC. If I hit Command-Shift-4, now when I take a screenshot here, instead of it saving to my desktop, it's going to copy that. Okay. And so now if I come back here, it should paste right in. Or not. Oh, maybe I did it wrong. Let's see. Yeah, it saved it to the desktop anyway. Never mind. But in any case, if you do that, it should copy it instead of just taking a screenshot. We're going to drop that in here. And so now we're going to resize this here. And so we can just add an image directly in here. Now that looks so linear as to be comical. So I'm going to have some fun with this, and I'm going to give it a little tilt there. Okay, so now we got this nice little tilty image. And again, we can have some fun with this image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this to open up our layer style palette. And now I'm going to give it kind of that Polaroid look by turning on the stroke. And we're going to make the stroke white. I'm going to move it to the inside, make it white. Okay, and so now we kind of have that Polaroid look or that old picture look. I'm going to boost that up to about a 6. I'm going to put a drop shadow on it, just like so. And see how well that stands out just by adding that drop shadow. Look at the difference to that. Boom. I mean, that just pops it right off the screen. And so now we can have a nice little image on here. Now, what if we decide, hey, you know what? That image looks kind of cool. I think I want that in the Photoshop, in the YouTube background. Well, we can grab this, and now we can just return the favor and drop that in here. Okay? We can bring that in here. We can resize it. My mouse decides to stop messing around. Resize that up if we wanted. Okay. Hit return. So now we would just move this over a little bit, like so. Oh, hello. Stay over there. It's like a dog that doesn't want to stay. There we go. Grab this one, bring that over. And so now we've got our image in there. And of course, our text here, we want to make sure is really centered. It wasn't. It was kind of centered under the text, but we want it to be totally centered. We can do that. And so there you go. We now have a YouTube background and a Facebook background. And of course, just like we did for Facebook, all we have to do now is come out here, look at these and say, all right, we need to have a LinkedIn background. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to create a new one for a personal background, 1584 by 396. Bring all our stuff in and just modify it around. And in Pinterest, we can do the same thing. You just find the dimensions here. Okay, we can go into Twitter. We can find the dimensions here. Profile photo, header photo, and in-stream photo, and resize it so that all of our graphics look exactly the same. So there you go. Whoo! All right, how many of you are tired at this point and feel like your head is going to explode from all this? Any opinions? Now, I realize I want to say one thing here. When it comes to Photoshop and whatnot, I'm what I call a technician. I am not an artist. So take what you saw here and realize that if you have an ounce of creativity, you can use the techniques that I showed you and do far better than what I just created. You know, what I created here is what a non-artist can kind of create when you know how to use the tool. So just understand that if you've got creativity, or, you know, you can do a much better background than I've done here. Obviously, if you're doing a business, you're going to want to put business pictures of the business people and whatnot, which is why I showed the picture at the end here. But the bottom line is you can create any of these things all at once. And one of the reasons we started this class was because there's a lot of tools out there that pop up and say, hey, we're better than Photoshop, and hey, we can do everything. Reality is they don't. None of them are going to be able to do everything Photoshop does. Photoshop is a program that has had millions and millions and millions of dollars poured into it to build an app that has been around for 30 years. So these fly-by-night apps are not going to be able to beat it. Now, if you use Canva or you use Usine, that's a slightly different story, because Canva and Usine, those are essentially template programs. They are programs that are filled with YouTube background templates and Facebook page templates and things like that. So you can definitely use those and have some fun with them. You're not going to be able to do all the things that we did today. You're going to be able to take a template, make some tweaks, and have a really good background. But if you need to do things that are really custom, it's not going to be able to be done. They're not going to be able to do a lot of the stuff we did here. They're going to be able to create quick, nice, template-based stuff. And they do a good job at it. But this is a little bit different. Even one of my personal favorite tools, which is Thumbnail Blaster, same type of thing. You can do a whole lot more in Photoshop creating a thumbnail than you can in Thumbnail Blaster. The reason I use Thumbnail Blaster is I can save my templates in there and make them in a split second. But when you need to actually create things, this is where you would go. And even when I use Thumbnail Blaster, I come in here to build things that I bring into Thumbnail Blaster. Okay. So that's where the difference comes in. Gary says he has zero creativity. Perfect. Then you can do just like I did here. You can do just as good. Social media size guidelines. Yes. So Zahid asked, is there a link for the social media guidelines? Yes. In fact, John just posted it there. It's raiselinks.com/PS training. That's going to be the membership site for this training. So everything that we do each week, these lessons will each week be put into there. And then at the end, you're going to have a full course that you can access. And in there, we've already got the guidelines. It's under week 1, which is the only lesson in there right now is week 1, which doesn't have a video yet because we're recording it. But it does have the guidelines in there. And the guidelines are a big, long Google Doc. So if you sign up for that, just go in there, sign in for that class. And the first thing that you'll get right now is those guides. I will be putting different things in there as we go along. So as we learn different things, we're going to start to put different things into there. And like I said, this class right now, I kind of tentatively said 8 weeks. The reality is it could be more than 8 weeks. It could be, it could be less than 8 weeks maybe, but it could be more than 8 weeks because we want to go through a lot of different things and really show people how to use it. And again, the goal of this class is not to go through, this is the pointer, this is your, this is the selection tool, this is the lasso tool. We're going to use these things as we go along, but the idea behind this is to get you to use Photoshop for something purposeful, not just show you where the buttons are. Quite honestly, most classes that you take on this would never have showed you some of the things we talked about in the style palettes. They never would have showed you some of the little tricks of doing the layer, where you move the layer out of the way. Whoa, hello, mouse. Look at my mouse is just having some fun of its own here. They're not going to teach you those things because it's not the stuff that normally gets taught in a Photoshop class. That's why I wanted to show you how to build things with Photoshop, not necessarily how to use Photoshop. And there's a ton. I mean, look at all these menus up here. We're not even going to touch some of these menus because it's not relevant to a lot of the stuff that we do. But once you understand how to build the things we're talking about, you can go in and learn a lot of these other things inside of Photoshop. YouTube has tons and tons of very specific trainings on how to create different things and how to do certain things. And we're going to teach you things about actions. We're going to teach you about layer styles. We're going to teach you, about patterns and all sorts of stuff over the next few weeks, how to use different types of graphics, how to save different types of graphics. And we can have a lot of fun with this. So I hope you enjoyed week 1. Next week, we're going to be getting into some other stuff and we'll be updating you on that. I kind of combined a little bit of what I wanted to teach next week into this week because I thought it was more important to get it into here. But now that we kind of understand how we're going to use Photoshop to create the graphics. I think what we're going to do next week is we're going to talk specifically about how you can use Photoshop to create graphics for your videos, because that's another thing that we do a lot of that most people do not teach. When people are teaching Photoshop classes, it's usually how to touch up photos and maybe how to create some graphics and things like that. Next week, we're going to show you how you can use Photoshop to create graphics specifically for your videos. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to learn a lot of cool stuff. And I hope you join us for it. And by the way, I tried to answer questions as they come along. If you have questions, write them down, bring them with you next week, and we'll answer them for you. Reach out to me on Facebook and give me those questions. We'll be glad to answer there as well. You can also put the questions inside the members area. There's a comment section. I may or may not notice them right away, but I'll try to keep my eye on them and notice those questions and answer them. But enjoy this. Go back over it. Watch it again. It should be up in the members area in a couple of hours. And we'll see you guys next week. So have a great week and stay safe.